The rain in Seattle does not wash things away. It presses them down. It pushes the gray sky against the earth until the horizon disappears, trapping us in a bubble of wet concrete and static. That Friday evening, the rain was tapping a frantic rhythm against the kitchen window, a sound like 1,000 tiny fingers demanding to be let in. I stood by the island, drying a wine glass with a cloth that had seen better days, watching my wife, Eve. She was sitting at the small dining table we rarely used, the glow of her smartphone illuminating her face in a spectral blue hue. She was smiling at the screen, a soft, private smile that vanished the moment she looked up and saw me watching her. The silence between us was not empty. It was heavy, filled with unsaid words and accumulated grievances that had settled like dust on furniture nobody touches anymore. I placed the glass on the rack. The clink of crystal against metal sounded like a gunshot in the quiet room. "Is there any coffee left?" she asked without looking at me. Her thumbs were flying across the screen, typing a message that I knew I would never see. "I think so," I said. "I made a fresh pot an hour ago." She sighed. A short, sharp exhalation of breath that signaled her disappointment with the universe in general and me in particular. "You know I hate stale coffee, David." "Never mind. I will just drink water. I need to stay hydrated for tomorrow anyway." Tomorrow. Saturday. The day of the sacred pilgrimage to the fitness center. For the past 6 months, Eve had transformed. She had always been fit, but this was different. This was an obsession. New clothes, expensive supplements, and hours upon hours spent at the Platinum Gym on the other side of town. She claimed it was about health, about finding herself again after turning 30, but the woman who came back from those sessions did not seem found. She seemed further away. "You have been training a lot lately," I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. I leaned against the counter, crossing my arms. "Do you think maybe we could skip the gym tomorrow? Go for a drive? The coast might be clearing up by noon." Eve finally put the phone down. She placed it face down on the table, a reflex she had developed recently. She looked at me, her eyes narrowing slightly, as if I had suggested we set the house on fire. "Skip it?" she repeated. "David, consistency is the key to results. You would know that if you ever took care of yourself." I felt the sting, but I ignored it. "I go for runs," I said. "I am in decent shape." "Running around the block is not training," she scoffed. She picked up her glass of water and took a sip, her eyes drifting back to the face-down phone. "Besides, Kyle says I am at a critical point in my progress. If I miss a session now, I lose weeks of momentum." Kyle. The personal trainer. The man whose name had become a third resident in our home. Kyle said this. Kyle suggested that. Kyle thinks we should change our diet. I had never met him, but I knew he was 28, formerly in the military, and apparently the fountain of all wisdom. I walked over to the table and sat opposite her. "I just feel like I never see you, Eve. We live in the same house, but we are like ghosts passing in the hallway. I miss you. I miss us." She rolled her eyes. It was such a teenage gesture, so full of disdain, that it almost made me laugh. "Almost. Don't be dramatic," she said. "I am right here." "Are you?" I asked. "Because it feels like you are somewhere else. Even when you are here, you are on that phone. Who are you texting anyway?" "It is the group chat from the gym," she lied. I knew she was lying because her left eyelid twitched slightly, a tell she had never managed to unlearn. "We are sharing meal plans. At 10 on a Friday night? Support is a 24-hour commitment, David." She stood up, grabbing her phone and holding it tight against her chest. "God, why are you so insecure? It is exhausting." "I am not insecure," I said, my voice dropping an octave. "I am your husband. I am trying to connect with you." She looked down at me, and her expression shifted from annoyance to something colder. Pity. It was pity. "You want to know the truth?" she said, her voice dropping to a whisper that cut through the sound of the rain. "Kyle gives me more attention in 1 hour than you give me in a month. He actually looks at me. He listens to me. He pushes me to be better. You just exist, David. You are just there. Maybe if you learned a thing or two from him, I would not need to spend so much time away." The words hung in the air, vibrating. It was not just an insult. It was an eviction notice. She was evicting me from her emotional life. I stared at her, my face a mask of calm. Inside, the machinery of my mind had stopped, frozen by the sheer audacity of the statement. I paid the mortgage on this house. I paid for the car she drove. I paid for the very gym membership she was using as a weapon against me. I listened to her complain about her mother, her friends, the weather, the traffic. I had absorbed her moods for 5 years. And now I was being compared to a man she paid by the hour to count her reps. You are right, I said. The words tasted like ash. Absolutely right. She blinked, surprised by my surrender. She had expected a fight. She had wanted a fight, because a fight would justify her anger. My agreement left her off balance. Good, she said, recovering quickly. I am going to bed. Do not stay up late. You look tired. She turned and walked out of the kitchen, taking the light with her. I listened to her footsteps on the stairs, then the soft click of the bedroom door closing. The lock did not turn, but it might as well have. I stood in the kitchen for a long time. The refrigerator hummed, a low, electric drone that harmonized with the rain. I washed the rest of the dishes. I wiped the counters. I arranged the spice jars in alphabetical order. I was functioning on autopilot, my body moving while my mind began to thaw. She was cheating on me. I knew it not with the panic of a jealous lover, but with the cold certainty of a data analyst. The pattern was there. The behavioral changes. The secrecy with the phone. The projection of guilt onto me. The sudden, vicious comparison to another man. It was a classic dataset. The conclusion was inevitable. But I needed proof. In my line of work, you do not present a theory without the raw data to back it up. I needed logs. I needed timestamps. I needed evidence. I walked into the living room and sat on the leather sofa. The house felt massive, a cavern of shadows. I thought about the phone. She never let it out of her sight. It was locked with a biometric passkey. Getting into it would be impossible without alerting her. But people who lead double lives often make mistakes. They get arrogant. They get sloppy. I replayed the evening in my head. She had come home from errands before dinner. She had brought groceries. She had parked the car in the garage. She had come in with 3 bags. Her purse was over her shoulder. Her phone was in her hand. But there was something else. A flicker of memory. When she came in, she had dropped her keys on the console table. Then she had gone back to the garage door, opened it, looked out, and closed it again. Why? To check if the garage door was down? No, the automatic sensor light would have told her that. She had forgotten something. Or she had hidden something. I stood up. The clock on the wall read 11:15 p.m. Upstairs, the house was silent. Eve was likely asleep, or pretending to be. I moved quietly to the mudroom that connected the kitchen to the garage. The air in the garage was colder, smelling of gasoline and damp concrete. The overhead light flickered on as I stepped in. Her car, a white SUV that I washed every Sunday, sat parked in the center. It looked innocent enough. A vehicle for suburbia, for grocery runs and yoga classes. I walked around to the passenger side. I tried the handle. Locked. Of course. I went back to the mudroom and took the spare key fob from the hook inside the cabinet. I pressed the unlock button. The chirping sound seemed deafening in the enclosed space. I paused, listening for any movement upstairs. Nothing. I opened the passenger door and slid inside. The interior smelled of her perfume, vanilla and sandalwood, and something else. Menthol? Muscle cream? Kyle's influence, no doubt. I checked the glove compartment. Registration, insurance, a pack of napkins, a tire gauge. Nothing. I checked the center console. Gum wrappers, a charging cable, a tube of lip balm. I checked the door pockets. Empty. I sat back, frustration rising. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was just a paranoid husband projecting his insecurities, just like she said. I reached down to adjust the floor mat, which had slid forward slightly. My fingers brushed against something hard and plastic tucked deep under the seat, wedged between the rail and the carpet. My heart hammered against my ribs. I pulled it out. It was a phone. Not her sleek, latest model smartphone. This was a cheap, black Android device, the kind you buy at a pharmacy with cash. A burner. I held it in my hand, feeling its weight. It was the physical manifestation of my failing marriage. I pressed the power button. The screen lit up. 74% battery. No passcode. Of course, no passcode. Why lock a phone that is never supposed to be found? The best security is obscurity. I swiped the screen. The background was the default blue swirl. No apps downloaded. No social media. Just the basics. I opened the call log. One contact. The name listed was husband number 2. I stared at the screen. The mockery of it took my breath away. It was a joke. An inside joke between them. I was husband number 1, the boring, paying placeholder. And this was the alternative. I tapped the message icon. The thread was long. Husband number 2, did you get away? Me, Eve, not yet. He is hovering. He is so needy tonight. Husband number 2, tell him to go earn some money. I need you here. The bed feels too big. Me, Eve, soon. Saturday is our day. I can't wait to feel your hands on me. Husband number 2, where the red set. The one I bought you. I closed the messages. I had seen enough. The bile rose in my throat, hot and acidic. I wanted to smash the phone against the dashboard. I wanted to run upstairs and scream at her until the windows shattered. But I didn't. I sat there in the dark garage, breathing slowly. In, out. In, out. Rage is a fire that burns the house down. I did not want to burn the house down. I wanted to own the house and evict the squatters. I needed to know who he was. Husband number 2 was not a name. It was a title. I checked the number. It was a local area code. I could run a reverse lookup, but burner phones often lead to dead ends or shell registrations. I needed to hear him. I needed to confirm who had destroyed my life. If I called him now, from this phone, he would expect Eve. If I spoke, he would hang up. If I stayed silent, he would get suspicious. I looked at the phone in my hand, then at the door leading back to the house. I had an idea. It was risky, but I had the tools. I am a data analyst, but my hobby, my passion, is audio engineering and machine learning. I had spent months building neural networks to restore old jazz recordings. I understood voice synthesis. I slipped the burner phone into my pocket and went back inside. I moved like a thief in my own home. I went to my study on the ground floor and closed the door. I did not turn on the main light, relying only on the glow of my 3 monitors. I opened my laptop. I needed a sample of Eve's voice. That was easy. I had hundreds of videos on my phone. Birthdays, vacations, random clips of her talking to the dog. I transferred 5 minutes of clear audio into my processing software. The algorithm worked fast. It stripped away the background noise, the wind, the dog barking. It isolated the phonemes, the cadence, the pitch. Within 20 minutes, I had a functional voice model. It wasn't perfect, it wouldn't fool someone in a long, philosophical debate, but for a short, hushed sentence? It was indistinguishable. I typed a phrase into the text-to-speech engine. Hey. I cannot talk loud. He is still awake. Just wanted to hear you. I pressed play. Eve's voice came out of the speakers. It was uncanny. The slight rasp in her hey, the dip in tone at the end of the sentence. It was her. I connected the audio output of the laptop to my own phone, running it through a VoIP application that would allow me to mask my number, or better yet, spoof the number of the burner phone. I set the caller ID to match the number of the device I found in the car. I put on my noise-canceling headphones. I took a deep breath. My hand hovered over the call button. This was the point of no return. Once I made this call, the abstract concept of betrayal would become a concrete reality. I would hear the voice of the enemy. I clicked the mouse. The ringing sound filled my headphones. 1 ring. 2 rings. Click. Finally, a voice said on the other end. It was deep, confident, dripping with a sickening familiarity. I thought you chickened out, babe. I froze. My finger hovered over the playback button for the synthesized voice, but I didn't press it. I didn't need to. I knew that voice. It wasn't a stranger. It wasn't some random muscle-bound trainer named Kyle whom I had never met. Or rather, maybe Kyle was just a code name she used to throw me off. Hello, the voice said again, impatient now. Eve? Are you there? Tell me you are coming over. I have the whiskey you like. I sat back in my ergonomic chair, the breath leaving my lungs in a long, shuddering sigh. The room seemed to spin slightly. The voice belonged to Greg. Greg was Eve's ex-husband. The man she had divorced 5 years ago. The man she had described as a narcissist, a control freak, a mistake. The man she had sworn she never wanted to see again. She had told me horror stories about their marriage, How he ignored her, how he belittled her. And now, he was husband number 2. The irony was so sharp it felt like a physical puncture wound. She wasn't just cheating. She was recycling. She was running back to the very past she had claimed to escape, using me as the safe harbor while she sailed back out into the storm she said she hated. Eve? Greg's voice was getting annoyed. Stop playing games. If you are not coming, just say so. I have other options. I pressed the button on my screen. Hey. I cannot talk loud. He is still awake. Just wanted to hear you. The synthesized voice of Eve whispered through the line. Greg chuckled. It was a dark, oily sound. He is always awake, isn't he? Pathetic. Don't worry about him. He is harmless. Just a wallet with legs. Get in the car, baby. Come home. Come home. He called his house her home. I ended the call. I took the headphones off and laid them on the desk. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from a cold, crystalline adrenaline. So, it was Greg. He was a personal trainer now? I didn't know that. Last I heard, he was selling insurance. He must have reinvented himself. And Eve? Eve was his prized client. I looked at the burner phone sitting on my desk. Then I looked at the family photo on my shelf, me and Eve on our wedding day. She looked so happy then. Or maybe she was just good at acting. I picked up the burner phone and walked back to the garage. I placed it exactly where I had found it, wedged under the passenger seat. I adjusted the mat. I locked the car. I put the key fob back in the mudroom. I went upstairs. I brushed my teeth. I changed into my pajamas. I slipped into bed beside my wife. She was breathing deeply, the rhythm of deep sleep. She looked innocent in the moonlight. Beautiful. I lay on my back, staring at the ceiling. The rain was still falling, but it didn't sound like fingers anymore. It sounded like applause. A slow, steady applause for the performance of a lifetime. She wanted attention. She wanted a man who took charge. She wanted drama. Okay, Eve, I whispered into the darkness. You want attention? I will give you attention. I will give you the most personal attention you have ever experienced. I turned my head and looked at her one last time as a husband who loved her. When I woke up tomorrow, that man would be gone. Tomorrow, I would be someone else. Tomorrow, I would be the director of a play she didn't even know she was starring in. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in months, I slept soundly. I had a plan. And unlike her, I didn't need a burner phone to execute it. I just needed patience and a gift basket. The game had begun. The morning sun did not break through the clouds, it merely bruised them, turning the slate-gray sky into a mottled purple bruise. I woke up before the alarm, my body rigid, my mind already racing at a velocity that made my physical stillness painful. Beside me, Eve slept with the peaceful, rhythmic breathing of the innocent. Or the sociopathic. I lay there for a long time, watching the rise and fall of her chest, marveling at how a human being could house so much deception without leaking a single drop of it in their sleep. She looked soft. Vulnerable. If I did not know better, if I had not sat in my study the night before listening to the synthesized voice of my wife arrange a rendezvous with her ex-husband, I would have pulled the duvet up to cover her shoulder. Instead, I got out of bed. The floorboards were cold under my feet, a grounding sensation that helped anchor me to the reality I had chosen to construct. Today was Saturday. The day of the ritual. The day of the workout. I went downstairs and started the coffee machine. The mechanical whir and drip were comforting sounds, the soundtrack of a domestic life that no longer existed. I stood by the window, watching the rain mist against the glass, and formulated my strategy. The key to a successful ambush is not the weapon, it is the camouflage. I had to be the David she expected. The boring David. The predictable David. The husband number 1 who asked about tire pressure and grocery lists. I heard her stirring upstairs. 10 minutes later, she appeared in the kitchen, dressed in expensive compression gear that hugged her frame. She looked athletic, purposeful. She also looked beautiful, which was the cruelest part of the joke. She was glowing with an anticipation she tried to mask as discipline. "Good morning," I said, turning with a mug in my hand. I forced a smile. It felt tight, like a mask that didn't quite fit, but she wasn't looking closely enough to notice the seams. "You are up early. Big session today?" She nodded, moving past me to the refrigerator. She grabbed a bottle of electrolyte water. "Yeah. Kyle wants to push for a personal best on the deadlift. It is going to be brutal. I sip my coffee to hide the grimace. Kyle. The Phantom. The code name for Greg. It was fascinating, in a morbid way, how easily the lie rolled off her tongue. She didn't stumble. She didn't hesitate. She had created an entire fictional character to cover her tracks, a separate reality where she was a dedicated athlete and not a woman sneaking off to sleep with the man she had spent 5 years complaining about. Well, be careful, I said. Do not overexert yourself. She stopped and looked at me, a flicker of suspicion in her eyes. It was gone as quickly as it came. She was checking the perimeter, making sure my compliance was genuine. You are in a good mood, she said. Usually, you are grumpy on Saturdays when I leave. I shrugged. I did some thinking last night. About what you said. About attention. You were right, Eve. I have been distant. I have been focused on work, on data, on the routine. If this gym time makes you happy, if it makes you feel like yourself again, who am I to stand in the way? I want you to be happy. The lie tasted sweet. It was the perfect countermove. By validating her cover story, I lowered her defenses. She relaxed, her shoulders dropping an inch. She walked over and pecked me on the cheek. It was a dry, perfunctory kiss. A tax paid to the landlord. Thanks, David. I appreciate that. I really do. I will be back around too. Say hi to Kyle for me, I said. She froze for a microsecond, her hand on the door handle. Then she laughed, a nervous, tinkling sound. I will. See you later. The door closed. The lock clicked. I listened to the garage door open, the engine of her SUV roar to life, and the sound of tires fading down the wet asphalt of our street. I was alone. And I had work to do. I did not go back to bed. I went straight to my study. The room was dark, illuminated only by the standby lights of my server rack. I sat in my chair, the command center of my retribution. The first step was reconnaissance. I knew the who, Greg. Now I needed the where and the what. I pulled up a browser and activated my VPN. I didn't want any digital breadcrumbs leading back to my home IP address. I started with the basics. Greg's full name. Gregory Thomas Miller. 5 years ago, when he and Eve divorced, he was a disaster. He had been fired from an insurance firm for fudging numbers. He drank too much. He gambled. Eve had painted a portrait of a sinking ship, and she had been the rat that swam to safety, my safety. But people change, or at least, their facades do. I found his LinkedIn profile first. It was polished, filled with buzzwords. Holistic lifestyle coach. Personal transformation specialist. Founder of Miller Fitness Dynamics. The photo showed a man who had aged, but well. The bloated look of his drinking days was gone, replaced by lean muscle and a tan that looked expensive. He was smiling a winning, predatory smile. I moved to Facebook and Instagram. His profiles were public. Of course they were. Narcissists need an audience, privacy is of no use to them. The feed was a gallery of a fabricated life. Motivational quotes overlaid on pictures of sunsets. Videos of him lifting heavy weights with captions about grinding and hustle. But I wasn't interested in his vanity. I was interested in his collateral damage. I scrolled back 6 months. Then a year. And there she was. Sarah. She appeared in a photo dated 2 years ago. She said yes. The caption read, a ring, a beach, a smile that looked genuine and full of hope. Sarah was younger than Eve, perhaps 26 or 27. She had a soft face, kind eyes, and the look of someone who believes in fairy tales. I kept scrolling. The wedding photos. A small ceremony, tasteful. Then, 7 months ago, a photo of a nursery. Waiting for our little champion. And finally, 3 months ago, a picture of a baby boy. Welcome to the world, Leo. I leaned back in my chair, the data coalescing into a picture that made my stomach churn. Greg wasn't just a single guy having a fling with his ex-wife. He was a new father. He was a husband. He was playing the role of the reformed family man, the pillar of strength for a young wife and an infant son. And meanwhile, on Saturday mornings, he was inviting his ex-wife over to train. I switched tabs to the folder where I had saved the screenshots from the burner phone. I read the texts again, forcing myself to absorb the cruelty. Greg, Sarah is so exhausted all the time. It is like living with a zombie. She has let herself go since the kid came. Zero effort. Eve, I know, right? You deserve someone who keeps up with you. That is why we work. We are on the same level. Greg, exactly. You look better now than when we were married. Maybe dumping that boring accountant husband of yours did you some good. Eve, he is a data analyst, not an accountant. But yeah, boring is the word. He is safe. You are the danger I need. They were mocking us. They were bonding over their disdain for the very people who supported them. Sarah was at home, likely exhausted from caring for a 3-month-old baby, while her husband was complaining about her lack of effort to his mistress. And I was the safe wallet, the boring backdrop to their exciting drama. My anger, which had been a hot, chaotic thing the night before, cooled into something solid. A weapon. I wasn't just a jealous husband anymore. I was an agent of karma. Sarah didn't know. She was living in a house of cards, and the wind was picking up. I owed it to her to show her the foundation. I looked up Greg's address. It was in a suburb about 30 minutes away. A nice area, new developments. Houses that looked grand but were built cheaply. Fitting. I checked the time. It was 9 a.m. Eve would be with him now. They were probably laughing about me. About Sarah. I needed to construct the package. The Trojan horse. I grabbed my keys and left the house. I drove to an upscale gourmet market in the city center, a place where they played classical music and the fruit was arranged like jewelry. I wanted the gift to be impressive. It had to look like a legitimate thank you gesture, something that would bypass suspicion until it was too late to close the lid. I grabbed a wicker basket, the kind used for corporate hampers. I filled the base with wood wool. Then I began the selection. A bottle of Pinot Noir. $80. A vintage known for its complex, bitter finish. A jar of artisanal olives. A box of Belgian truffles. 2 expensive crystal wine glasses. A selection of exotic fruits, dragon fruit, persimmons, things that looked beautiful but rotted quickly if not consumed. I paid cash. I didn't want the transaction appearing on our joint credit card statement before the detonation. I drove back home, carrying the basket into my study like a bomb disposal expert carrying a live device. Now came the payload. I opened the drawer where I kept my office supplies. I took out a heavy, cream-colored envelope and a sheet of high-quality cardstock. I sat down to write the note. It had to be perfect. It had to be ambiguous enough that a courier would not think twice, but specific enough that Sarah, if she saw it, would pause. To the personal trainer who goes above and beyond, thank you for the incredible amount of personal attention you give to my wife. The results are undeniable. She is a new woman. I thought your wife should enjoy the fruits of your hard work too. With gratitude, Eve's husband. I read it over. It was polite. It was venomous. Personal attention. Hard work. It was the truth, wrapped in a lie. But a note was not enough. A note could be explained away. A note was hearsay. I needed hard data. I took a USB flash drive from my desk. It was a sleek, silver drive. I plugged it into my computer. I transferred the audio file of the call I had made the night before, the one where Greg called my wife Babe and told her to come home. I transferred the folder of screenshots from the burner phone. The texts about Sarah. The texts about me. The plans for their future. I created a simple text file titled read_me. TXT on the drive. Inside, I wrote, dates and times correspond to his training sessions. Check his location history. Check the bank accounts. I am sorry. I ejected the drive. I held it in my palm. It was so small, yet it contained the power to level a marriage. I placed the flash drive inside the box of Belgian truffles. I carefully slit the plastic wrap on the side, slid the drive in so it rested on top of the chocolates, and then used a heat gun on a low setting to reseal the plastic. It looked untouched. When Sarah opened the chocolates, and she would, who could resist $80 truffles? She would find the silver device. I placed the chocolates in the center of the basket. I arranged the wine and fruit around it. I tucked the envelope prominently at the front. Then I wrapped the entire basket in clear cellophane and tied it with a massive, shimmering gold ribbon. It was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive warfare. It looked like a celebration. It was a funeral. Now, delivery. I could not drive it there myself. If Greg was home, he would recognize me, or worse, Eve would see my car. If Sarah answered, I didn't want to be the face of her destruction. I wanted to remain the invisible hand. I logged into a same-day courier service app. I set up a pickup. I used a fake name for the sender, John Smith, but listed my real phone number for updates. The destination was Greg's home address. Instructions for driver: please deliver to the front door. Ring the bell. Ensure it is received by a resident. Do not leave on the porch. I requested a pickup time of 11:30 a.m. By my calculations, based on the drive time and the courier's estimate, the package would arrive at Greg's house around 12:30 p.m. Greg would still be training Eve. Or they would be in bed. Or perhaps they went out for lunch. It didn't matter. If Greg wasn't there, Sarah would be. It was Saturday. A young mother with a 3-month-old baby? The probability of her being home was over 90%. The courier arrived at 11:25. He was a young guy in a cap, chewing gum, completely oblivious to the fact that he was transporting a domestic nuclear device. Fragile? He asked, taking the basket. Very, I said. Handle with extreme care. He nodded, tossed it into the passenger seat of his van, and drove off. I went back inside and locked the door. The silence of the house felt different now. It was no longer empty, it was pregnant with waiting. I walked into the kitchen and made a sandwich, eating it over the sink without tasting it. I felt a strange vibration in my hands, a tremor of adrenaline that refused to subside. I checked the app. The dot representing the van was moving down the highway. 11:45 a.m. The van was exiting the city. 12 p.m. The van was entering the suburb. 12:15 p.m. The van was 3 blocks away from Greg's house. I sat on the living room floor, my phone in my hand, staring at the screen. I zoomed in on the map. I imagined the street. I imagined the house. I pictured Sarah inside, maybe feeding the baby, maybe folding laundry, unaware that a stranger was pulling into her driveway to hand her the answer to questions she hadn't even dared to ask yet. 12:22 p.m. The app status changed. Arrived. I held my breath. 12:25 p.m. Status update, delivered. Signed by S. Miller. S. Miller. Sarah Miller. She had it. I let out a breath that felt like it had been trapped in my lungs for years. She had the basket. She would see the beautiful wrapping. She would see the card. She would open it. She would read the note about personal attention. Confusion would set in first. Then suspicion. Then she would open the chocolates. She would find the drive. She would plug it in. And then, the world would break. I closed the app. There was nothing more I could do. The virus was in the system. The Trojan horse had breached the walls. Now, I had to prepare for the return of the traitor. Eve arrived home at 2:15 p.m. I heard the garage door open. I was sitting on the sofa, reading a book I hadn't turned the page of in an hour. I forced my body to relax. I uncrossed my legs. I put a calm, vaguely bored expression on my face. She walked in. She looked different than when she left. Her hair was damp, freshly showered. Her cheeks were flushed. She had that specific languidness about her movements that comes from physical satisfaction. It wasn't the exhaustion of lifting weights, it was the relaxation of release. "Hey," she said, dropping her gym bag in the hallway. "God, I am beat." "Welcome back," I said, looking up. "How was the session?" "Intense," she said, walking into the kitchen for water. "Kyle is a sadist. He had me doing circuits for an hour straight. I can barely feel my legs." I watched her through the open archway. The ease with which she lied was terrifying. It was a superpower. "Did you hit that personal best?" I asked. She paused, the bottle of water halfway to her lips. Yeah, I did. It felt amazing." "I bet it did," I said. She walked into the living room and flopped down on the armchair opposite me. She looked at me, and for a second, I saw a flicker of guilt. Just a shadow. But she pushed it down. "What did you do today?" she asked. "Oh, nothing much," I said. "Catching up on reading. Did some online shopping." "Shopping?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "You never shop. What did you buy?" "Just some gifts," I said. "For people who deserve them." She lost interest. "That is nice. Listen, I am going to take a nap. That workout wiped me out." "Go ahead," I said. "You earned it." She stood up and headed for the stairs. I watched her go. She had no idea. She was walking on a trapdoor that had already been unlatched. I waited until I heard the bedroom door close. Then I picked up my phone again. I had one more move to make. I needed to ensure that Sarah didn't just suffer in silence. I needed to ensure she reached out. I opened the cloning software again. I typed a text message, but I didn't send it to Greg. I sent it to the burner phone, which was still hidden in Eve's car. I knew Eve wouldn't check it while she was in the house with me. But later, when she went to check it, she would find a message from an unknown number, my spoofed number. Message: did you enjoy the chocolates? A friend. It was a risk. But I wanted to stir the pot. I wanted them paranoid. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of gray light and silence. Eve slept for 2 hours. When she woke up, she came downstairs, refreshed and cheerful. She hummed as she made tea. She talked about a movie she wanted to see. She was performing the role of the happy wife because her needs had been met elsewhere. It was a transactional happiness, dependent on the supply of dopamine she got from Greg. I played along. We ordered Thai food. We watched a documentary. I sat next to her on the sofa, my arm around her shoulders, feeling the warmth of her skin and thinking about the countdown clock ticking away in a suburb 30 minutes away. At 8 p.m., my phone buzzed. I looked down. It was a notification from the security system I had installed on the burner phone, a simple app that alerted me if the phone was moved or unlocked. Eve had gone to the garage to get a charger. She was checking the phone. 2 minutes later, she came back inside. Her face was pale. The flush was gone. Her eyes were wide, darting around the room. She looked at me, then looked away quickly. Everything okay? I asked, taking a bite of my spring roll. Yeah, she said. Her voice was brittle. I think I left the garage door open. It is cold in there. It happens, I said. She sat down, but she didn't eat. Her hands were trembling slightly. She kept checking her main phone, the screen lighting up her anxious face. She was waiting for a message from Greg. But Greg wasn't messaging. Because right now, Greg was likely walking into his own home, expecting a quiet evening, only to find his wife sitting at the kitchen table with a basket of fruit, a bottle of wine, and a laptop playing his own voice back to him. I took a sip of my beer. The bitter taste was gone. It tasted like victory. The storm had made landfall. And I was sitting comfortably in the eye of it. Suddenly, Eve's phone rang. It wasn't a text. It was a call. She jumped as if she had been electrocuted. She looked at the screen. Her eyes went wide with panic. She scrambled to silence it, but in her fumble, she almost dropped the phone. Who is calling at this hour? I asked casually. It is just a spam call, she stammered. Telemarketers. They are relentless. She rejected the call. 5 seconds later, it rang again. Persistent telemarketer, I noted. She stood up. I need to go to the bathroom. She practically ran out of the room. I listened. She didn't go to the bathroom. She went into the laundry room and closed the door. I muted the TV. I strained my ears. I couldn't hear the words, but I could hear the tone. It was a frantic, hushed whispering. High-pitched. Panicked. I sat there, staring at the blank screen of the television. I imagined the conversation. Greg calling her in a panic. My wife knows. She knows everything. Who sent this? Did you tell someone? Eve realizing that her safe little bubble had just been popped with a needle the size of a telephone pole. She came back into the room 3 minutes later. She looked like she had seen a ghost. Her skin was waxy, sweat beading on her forehead. I am not feeling well, she said. Her voice shook. I think the Thai food didn't agree with me. I am going to lay down. Okay, I said soothingly. Do you want some ginger ale? No. She snapped. Then, softer, no. Just, leave me alone. Please. She fled up the stairs. I stayed on the sofa. I picked up the remote and unmuted the TV. I watched the rest of the documentary. It was about predators in the wild. About how the most successful hunters are the ones who wait, who blend in, who strike only when the prey is completely unaware. I finished my beer. I walked to the window and looked out at the street. The rain had stopped. The clouds were breaking, revealing a sliver of the moon. I knew this wasn't over. This was just the opening salvo. Tomorrow, or the day after, the real confrontation would happen. Sarah would not stay quiet. Greg would try to do damage control. Eve would try to spin a web of lies to save herself. But they were fighting against gravity. I had already pulled the lever. I checked my email one last time before heading up to bed. There was a notification from the courier service asking for a rating. How was your delivery experience? I clicked 5 stars. Comment, executed perfectly. I turned off the lights downstairs. The house was dark, but for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of the shadows. I was the one casting them. I walked up the stairs, ready to lie next to my wife and listen to her toss and turn in the hell I had built for her. The Trojan horse had been accepted. Now, the city would burn. Sunday mornings in our house were usually defined by a sacred, unspoken lethargy. It was the day of thick newspapers, slow drip coffee, and silence that felt restorative rather than oppressive. But this Sunday was different. The silence that filled the kitchen was not the comfortable quiet of rest, it was the suffocating stillness of a held breath before a scream. The air felt pressurized, as if the barometric reading inside the living room had dropped low enough to herald a tornado. Eve was sitting at the breakfast nook, staring at a bowl of oatmeal she hadn't touched in 20 minutes. The steam had long since evaporated, leaving a congealed, gray surface that perfectly mirrored the pallor of her skin. She looked exhausted, the kind of deep, cellular fatigue that comes not from a lack of sleep, but from a surplus of fear. Every time her phone vibrated on the table, a phantom buzz, mostly, as she had turned it to silent, she flinched. Her shoulders would hike up toward her ears, and her eyes would dart to the black screen like a cornered animal watching a predator. I stood by the sink, rinsing a mug that was already clean. I was the warden of this prison, and I was patiently waiting for the executioner to arrive. I knew she was coming. I didn't know exactly when, and I didn't know exactly how, but the laws of physics applied to relationships just as they did to motion. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. I had launched a massive action into the universe yesterday with that gift basket. The reaction was inevitable. David? Eve's voice was thin, brittle. Yes? I turned, keeping my face composed. A mask of benign concern. Do you think we could go away today? Just drive somewhere? Maybe up to the cabin? I feel like I need fresh air. I feel suffocated in here. She wanted to run. Of course she did. The walls were closing in. She hadn't heard from Greg since the panicked, hushed phone call the night before. She was in the dark, and her imagination was filling the void with monsters. She wanted to retreat to our cabin, a place that represented safety, a place paid for by the husband she mocked to her lover. I don't think that's a good idea, Eve, I said calmly. The roads are slick from the storm. And honestly, I have some work to catch up on. She looked at me, desperation warring with irritation. You never work on Sundays. Since when do you prioritize data over me? Since yesterday, I thought. But I said, just a big project. It requires my full attention. She scoffed, stabbing her spoon into the cold oatmeal. Attention. Everyone talks about attention, but nobody actually gives it. The irony was so rich it almost choked me. I turned back to the window. The driveway was empty, a strip of wet asphalt reflecting the gray sky. The rain had paused, leaving behind a damp, heavy mist that clung to the trees. And then, I saw it. It wasn't a sleek sports car or a menacing black van. It was a sensible, silver sedan, a family car with a "baby on board" sticker in the rear window. It turned into our driveway with a velocity that defied its suburban design. The tires skidded slightly on the wet leaves as the driver corrected the angle, accelerating rather than slowing down as the house loomed closer. "Here we go," I whispered. "What?" Eve asked. I didn't answer. I watched the car screech to a halt inches from my bumper. The engine cut off abruptly. The driver's door flew open before the car had fully settled on its suspension. A woman stepped out. She was wearing a raincoat over pajamas and boots that were unzipped. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun that was coming undone, strands whipping around her face in the wind. She looked frantic. She looked dangerous. She looked like a mother bear whose cub had been threatened. It was Sarah. "Who is that?" Eve stood up, moving to the window. "Why is she parking like a maniac?" I stayed silent. I watched Sarah march up the walkway. She didn't look at the landscaping. She didn't look at the architecture. Her eyes were fixed on the front door with a singular, terrifying intensity. She didn't ring the doorbell. She didn't knock. She began to pound on the wood with the flat of her hand, a rhythmic, heavy thudding that shook the frame. Bam! 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 David! Eve sounded frightened now. Who is that? What is happening? I think you should answer it, I said. Me? Why me? I don't know who that is. I think you do, I said softly. The pounding stopped for a second, then resumed, harder. Open this door. A voice screamed from outside. It was a voice raw with crying and sharpened by rage. Open the door, Eve. I know you are in there. Eve's face drained of blood. She took a step back, her hand flying to her mouth. No, she whispered. No, it can't be. I walked past her. I moved deliberately, calmly. I unlocked the deadbolt. I turned the handle. David, don't. Eve shrieked, but it was too late. I opened the door. Sarah stood on the threshold. She was trembling, vibrating with an energy that felt radioactive. Her eyes were red-rimmed and swollen, but the gaze she leveled at me was clear and piercing. She held a stack of crumpled papers in one hand and a familiar silver flash drive in the other. You, she said to me. She didn't say hello. She didn't apologize. She just acknowledged my existence as the gatekeeper. I stepped aside. Come in, Sarah. She stormed past me, bringing the smell of rain and ozone into the hallway. She didn't stop until she reached the archway of the living room, where Eve was standing, frozen like a statue made of guilt. Sarah stopped. The two women looked at each other. The silence that followed was louder than the pounding had been. It was the vacuum before an explosion. You, Sarah said again, but this time the word was a curse. She threw the papers. They didn't flutter gently, she hurled them with such force that they slapped against Eve's chest before scattering across the hardwood floor. What is this? Eve stammered, though she knew. She looked down at the sheets. They were screenshots. Enlarged, printed in high definition. Screenshots of her texts. Screenshots of her mocking Sarah. You want to talk about my stretch marks? Sarah screamed. Her voice cracked, soaring into a register of pure pain. You want to talk about how I am a zombie, because I am up all night nursing his son? You want to discuss my lack of effort? Eve took another step back, hitting the edge of the sofa. I don't know what you are talking about. You are crazy. Who are you? Don't you dare, Sarah hissed, stepping closer. She was shorter than Eve, but in that moment, she seemed 10 feet tall. Don't you dare pretend you don't know me. I am the woman whose husband you have been stealing every Saturday morning. I am the woman whose life you have been laughing at while you play pretend in my bed. It's a lie. Eve shouted, looking at me for support. David, she's lying. These are fake. Someone made these up. It's AI. It's a scam. I leaned against the doorframe, crossing my arms. I looked at my wife. It was pathetic, really. The way she tried to cling to the lie even as the roof was collapsing on her head. It is not a scam, Eve, I said. My voice was low, but it cut through her hysteria. She whipped her head toward me. You believe her? A stranger barging into our house? I believe the data, I said. And I believe my own ears. Sarah held up the flash drive. My husband, she spat the word like it was poison, tried to tell me it was a joke. He tried to tell me it was just locker room talk. Until I played the audio. Until I heard your voice. No. Eve whispered. I heard you, Sarah continued, her voice trembling. I heard you tell him that David was boring. That he was just a wallet. I heard you planning to sell this house. I heard you talking about how you were going to leave us both with nothing. She took another step. Eve flinched. You are a predator, Sarah said. You didn't just want him. You wanted to destroy me. Why? Because I have what you couldn't keep? Because I am the wife and you are just the Saturday appointment? That hit a nerve. Eve's face twisted. You don't know anything about us. We have a connection. We have history. He loves me. Sarah laughed. It was a short, sharp sound, devoid of humor. He loves you? He threw you under the bus the second I played that tape. He begged. He cried. He told me you were the one pursuing him. He told me you were obsessed. He called you a mistake. Again. Eve shook her head violently. He wouldn't say that. He did, Sarah said. And then he asked if keeping you away would save his reputation at the gym. That is how much he loves you. You are a liability, Eve. You are just a bad habit he picked up again. Eve collapsed onto the sofa. The fight seemed to drain out of her legs. She looked at the scattered papers on the floor, the evidence of her cruelty, exposed to the light. I walked over to the coffee table and picked up one of the sheets. It was a text exchange where Eve had made a joke about Sarah's postpartum depression. Eve, she is just using the baby as an excuse to be lazy. She needs to get over it. I read it aloud. My voice was flat, emotionless. I looked at Eve. Lazy? I asked. Is that what you think of a mother raising a child? David, please, Eve sobbed. I was just trying to impress him. I didn't mean it. It was just talk. Just talk, I repeated. Just talk that destroyed 2 families. I looked at Sarah. She was shaking, the adrenaline starting to fade into shock. She looked around the room, seeing the life Eve and I had built, the expensive furniture, the art on the walls, the comfort. You have everything, Sarah whispered to Eve. You have a beautiful home. You have a husband who, she glanced at me, who clearly pays attention to details, considering how he packaged that basket. Why wasn't it enough? Why did you have to come for mine? Eve didn't answer. She just buried her face in her hands. Get out, I said. The room went silent. Eve looked up, her mascara smeared across her cheeks. What? I said, get out. David, you can't, this is my house too. Not anymore, I said. I walked over to the mantelpiece where I had left a manila envelope earlier that morning. I tossed it onto the coffee table. It landed with a heavy slap. What is that? She asked. I spoke to my lawyer this morning, I lied. It wasn't a lie, exactly. I had spoken to a legal AI bot that drafted the separation agreement, but the effect was the same. Infidelity triggers the morality clause in our prenuptial agreement. You remember that clause, don't you? The one your father insisted on because he thought I was the one who would cheat? Her eyes went wide. You have 1 hour, I said. Pack a bag. Take your clothes. Take your toiletries. Leave the car keys. The SUV is in my name. David, be reasonable. She pleaded, standing up and reaching for my arm. I stepped back, avoiding her touch as if she were contagious. Where am I supposed to go? Greg won't take me. That, I said, sounds like a problem for husband number 2. Sarah let out a breath that sounded like a sob. She looked at me, and for the first time, there was a flash of solidarity in her eyes. We were strangers, bound by the wreckage of the same collision. You heard him, Sarah said to Eve. Get out. Or I will start sending these photos to every parent at the school where you work. I think the PTA would be very interested in your views on motherhood. Eve looked from me to Sarah. She saw no mercy in either of us. She saw only the reflection of her own actions staring back at her. She let out a scream of frustration, a primal, childish sound, and ran up the stairs. We heard the slam of the bedroom door, then the chaotic sounds of drawers being ripped open and hangers clattering. I stood in the living room with Sarah. The tension began to dissipate, replaced by a heavy, sorrowful exhaustion. I am sorry, I said to her. I didn't know how else to tell you. Sarah wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. You sent the basket? Yes. It was cruel, she said. It was necessary, I replied. Would you have believed me if I just called you? No, she admitted softly. I would have thought you were the crazy one. Greg, he is very convincing. He makes you feel like you are the problem. He made me feel like I was losing my mind for suspecting him. Gaslighting, I said. It is their favorite weapon. She looked down at the papers on the floor. What happens now? Now we clean up, I said. I walked to the kitchen and poured a glass of water. I brought it to her. She took it with shaking hands. Thank you. You should know, I said, that I have more. I have the financial records. I know about the account in the Caymans. I know about the money Greg was siphoning from your joint savings. Sarah nearly dropped the glass. The savings? That was for Leo's college. That was my inheritance from my grandmother. It is gone, Sarah. Or at least, moved. I can help you find it. I can help you trace it. But you need to be ruthless. You cannot let him talk his way out of this. Her expression hardened. The sadness evaporated, replaced by the cold steel of maternal instinct. He stole from our son? Yes. Then he is dead to me, she said. Not literally, but he is done. I will burn his life to the ground. We stood there in silence for a few minutes, 2 generals plotting a campaign on the battlefield of a suburban living room. Upstairs, the sounds of packing ceased. Heavy footsteps came down the stairs. Eve appeared with a large suitcase and a duffel bag. She had changed into jeans and a sweater. She looked smaller, diminished. She stopped at the bottom of the stairs. "I am going to my mother's," she announced, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and defiance. I didn't answer. I just looked at the door. She looked at me, waiting for me to crack. Waiting for me to say, "Stop, let's talk about this." She was used to me being the soft place to land. She was used to me fixing things. But I wasn't fixing this. I was demolishing it. "I will send for the rest of my things," she said. "Make sure you do it through a lawyer," I said. "I don't want you on the property again." She turned to Sarah. "I hope you are happy. You ruined everything." Sarah stepped forward, and Eve flinched. "You ruined it yourself, Eve. You planted the bomb. We just watched it go off." Eve glared at her, then lugged her bags to the door. She struggled with the lock for a moment, her hands shaking, before throwing the door open. The wind rushed in, cold and damp. She stepped out onto the porch, leaving the door wide open behind her. I walked over and closed it. I turned the lock. The click was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. She was gone. The house felt instantly lighter, as if a heavy, dark tapestry had been pulled down from the walls. I turned back to Sarah. She was sagging now, the adrenaline finally gone. She looked like she might collapse. "Are you okay to drive?" I asked. "I don't know," she whispered. I feel like I am waking up from a nightmare, but the nightmare is real." "Sit down," I said. "Just for a minute." She sat on the edge of the sofa, careful not to touch the spot where Eve had been. I sat in the armchair opposite her. "What are you going to do?" she asked me. "I am going to reformat my hard drive," I said, using a metaphor she might not catch. "I am going to delete the corrupted files and start over." "What about you?" She looked at her hands. "I have a baby. I can't just check out. I have to be strong for Leo. But I don't know how I am going to pay the mortgage if Greg drained the accounts. I don't know how I am going to tell my parents." "You won't be alone," I said. "We have leverage." "Leverage?" "I told you I have the records. I also have the recordings. If Greg tries to hide assets, if he tries to fight you on custody, if he tries to play the victim, we release everything. We send it to his clients. We send it to the gym management. We make him toxic. He will sign whatever you put in front of him just to keep us quiet." Sarah looked at me, realizing the depth of my preparation. "You really thought of everything." "I had a whole night," I said. "And I am very good at analyzing worst-case scenarios." She managed a weak smile. "I guess boring husbands have their uses." I smiled back. It was a sad smile, but it was genuine. "We are the infrastructure, Sarah. We are the ones who keep the lights on and the bills paid. They called us boring because they don't understand that stability is the hardest thing to build. And the easiest thing to break." She nodded, tears welling up in her eyes again. "I loved him, you know? I really tried." "I know," I said. "I loved her too. That is why we have to do this. Because they took that love and used it against us. They made us accessories to our own humiliation." She stood up, smoothing down her raincoat. "You are right. I need to go. I need to get back to Leo. My mom is watching him, but I need to hold him." I walked her to the door. The storm outside had passed. The clouds were breaking apart, revealing patches of pale, washed-out blue. "Thank you, David," she said. "It sounds crazy to say thank you for destroying my marriage, but thank you for the truth. The truth is the only thing that matters," I said. She walked to her silver car. She looked back once, waved, and got in. I watched her back out of the driveway, much slower than she had arrived. She drove away, a woman with a broken heart but a clear path. I went back inside. The house was quiet again. But it was a different silence. It was the silence of a clean slate. I looked at the crumpled papers on the floor. I bent down and picked them up, one by one. I walked to the fireplace. I didn't light a fire, that would be too dramatic, too cliché. I just crumpled them into a ball and threw them into the trash can in the kitchen. I washed the glass Sarah had used. I wiped the counter. Then, I went to my study. I sat at my desk and woke up my computer. I opened the folder labeled Project Trojan. I had 2 new files to add. The separation agreement. And the audio log of today's confrontation, which the security system in the hallway had automatically recorded. I dragged them into the folder. Phase 1 was complete. The separation. Phase 2 was beginning. The dismantling. I pulled up the gym's website. I found the contact email for the regional manager. I found the contact form for the certification board that issued Greg's personal training license. I began to type. Subject, ethics violation and formal complaint regarding Gregory Miller. I wasn't doing this out of spite anymore. I was doing it for Sarah. I was doing it for Leo. And yes, a little bit for me. I typed steadily, the mechanical click of the keys filling the room. It was a rhythm. A drumbeat. The sound of a war that was no longer fought with shouting and slamming doors, but with facts, dates, and consequences. Eve had wanted a story. She had wanted excitement. She had wanted to be the main character. Well, I was writing her ending now. And I was going to make sure it was unforgettable. I hit send. I leaned back in my chair and looked out the window at the wet garden. The ferns were dripping. The world looked scrubbed clean. Your move, husband number 2, I whispered. But I knew he had no moves left. He just didn't know it yet. The days following the expulsion of Eve from the house were defined by a strange, echoing silence. It was not the peaceful quiet of a library, but the hollow stillness of a museum after closing hours. The house was filled with objects that had lost their context. The yoga mat rolled in the corner of the living room. The half-empty bottle of oat milk in the refrigerator. The subscription magazines on the coffee table addressed to a woman who no longer lived here. I moved through the rooms like a curator of my own history, cataloging the artifacts of a failed civilization. I had changed the locks within 3 hours of her departure. The locksmith was a man of few words, a heavy-set fellow who had clearly seen the wreckage of marriages before. He didn't ask why I was changing the deadbolts on a Sunday evening. He simply drilled the metal with a grim efficiency, handed me the new keys, and left. The weight of that new key in my pocket was the first tangible proof that I was safe. On Tuesday, I met Sarah. We chose a diner halfway between our suburbs, a place with vinyl booths the color of dried blood and coffee that tasted of burnt aluminum. It was neutral ground. A place where nobody knew us, where we were just two more tired faces in a city of gray skies. When she walked in, she looked different than the wild, rain-soaked fury who had stormed my front door. She was dressed in a beige trench coat, her hair pulled back into a severe, tidy ponytail. She pushed a stroller with the mechanical precision of a soldier operating a tank. Leo was asleep inside, a bundle of innocence oblivious to the fact that his father's name was being dismantled piece by piece. I stood up as she approached. We didn't hug. We didn't shake hands. We nodded, a somber acknowledgement of our shared status as survivors of the same natural disaster. "How are you holding up?" I asked as she slid into the booth. She unbuttoned her coat and sighed, a sound that seemed to deflate her entire frame. "I am running on caffeine and spite, David. Mostly spite. Spite is a powerful fuel," I said. "It burns clean." She looked at me, her eyes dark and ringed with exhaustion. "Greg came home Sunday night. He tried to get in. I had already packed his bags and left them on the porch. He banged on the door for an hour. He shouted. He cried. He did the whole performance. Did you let him in?" "No." She took a sip of the water the waitress had placed down. I stood on the other side of the door and told him that if he didn't leave, I would call the police and show them the bruising on my arm from where he grabbed me 6 months ago. He left. I felt a cold spike of anger. "He hit you?" "He grabbed me," she corrected, looking down at the table. "Once. During an argument about money. He said he was just trying to calm me down. I believed him then. I don't believe him now." I reached across the table and placed my hand near hers, not touching, just offering a presence. "You are doing the right thing, Sarah." "I know," she said. "But it is hard. My parents are horrified. They liked him. They think I am overreacting to a one-time mistake. They don't know about the money yet. That is why we are here," I said. "We need to finalize the plan. We need to make sure the narrative is set in stone before he can spin it. Narcissists are master storytellers, Sarah. If we don't write the ending, he will write a sequel where he is the victim." She nodded, her expression hardening. "You said you had financial records?" I pulled a folder from my briefcase. I slid it across the laminated table. It was thick. "I did a deep dive into Eve's cloud backups," I explained. "She was careless. She synced everything. I found receipts, bank transfers, and emails. Greg didn't just spend your savings on gambling, Sarah. He spent it on Eve. Sarah opened the folder. Her eyes scanned the highlighted lines. Hotel rooms, I pointed out. Weekend trips they claimed were conferences. Dinners. Jewelry. He was using your grandmother's inheritance to buy my wife diamond earrings. Sarah's face went pale, then flushed with a red, hot anger. She closed the folder with a snap. Okay, she said. Her voice was steady, terrifyingly calm. I am done crying. Tell me what we do. We attack on two fronts, I said. Professional and social. If we only divorce them, they win. They get to play the tragic lovers who were misunderstood. They get to start over. But if we reveal who they really are, we take away their ability to hurt anyone else. The waitress arrived to take our order. We both ordered black coffee. Food seemed irrelevant. First, the gym, I said. Greg's entire identity is built on his status as an elite trainer. He charges a premium because he sells trust. He sells a holistic lifestyle. He is breaking the code of ethics, Sarah said. I looked it up. The certification board strictly forbids sexual relationships with current clients. It is considered an abuse of power. Exactly, I said. But an anonymous complaint gets ignored. A complaint with evidence, filed by a spouse, with financial proof of embezzlement? That gets an investigation. That gets a license revoked. I will send it, Sarah said. I will send it to the owner of Platinum Gym. He is a family man. He hates bad press. Good. I have drafted the email for you. It is in the folder. Just attach the files I put on the USB drive. And Eve? She asked. What about her? Eve cares about one thing, I said. Appearance. She thrives on being the envy of the neighborhood. The perfect house, the perfect husband, the perfect life. She is currently spinning a story to her friends that I was abusive, or that we simply grew apart. She is trying to save face. I pulled out my phone. I am the administrator of our neighborhood community group, I said. It has 500 members. Everyone from the HOA board to the local yoga moms. You are going to post about it? Sarah looked skeptical. That seems petty. It is not petty, I corrected. It is a public safety announcement. Eve is asking people for money. She is asking for places to stay. She is spinning a web. I am just turning on the lights. I showed her the draft I had written. It wasn't angry. It wasn't full of insults. It was cold, hard facts. To my neighbors and friends, many of you have asked why Eve is no longer living at our residence. To prevent rumors and to protect myself from the false narratives currently circulating, I am sharing the truth. Eve has left the marriage to pursue a relationship with her former husband, Gregory Miller. This decision came to light after the discovery of a long-term affair involving the misuse of marital funds and significant deception. I ask for privacy as I navigate the legal process of removing her from our accounts and our lives. Please direct any personal inquiries to her directly, as I am no longer responsible for her debts or her actions. Sarah read it. It is brutal, she whispered. Because it is so polite. Politeness is the best armor, I said. Do it, she said. I pressed post. The deed was done. The digital bell had been rung. Now, the gym, I said. Sarah took out her phone. She opened her email app. She attached the files. Her thumb hovered over the send button. She looked at Leo sleeping in the stroller. For you, little man, she whispered. So you don't grow up thinking this is how men treat women. She hit send. We sat there for another hour, drinking the bitter coffee, two generals watching the radar for the impact. We talked about small things. The weather. The best way to get stains out of carpets. How hard it is to sleep when the bed feels too big. It was the conversation of two people who were trying to remember how to be human after being treated like props. Do you want to see it? Sarah asked suddenly. See what? The fallout. Greg is at the gym right now. He has a client at noon. If the owner checks his email, it will happen today. I hesitated. It felt voyeuristic. But then I remembered the husband number 2 contact in the burner phone. I remembered the laughter I had read in their texts. Yes, I said. I want to see it. We paid the bill and walked out to the parking lot. The rain had started again, a light, misty drizzle that coated the world in a sheen of silver. We took my car. Sarah transferred the car seat with practiced ease. The drive to Platinum Gym was quiet. I drove past the familiar landmarks, the grocery store where Eve bought her kale, the coffee shop where she met her friends to complain about me. The city felt like a map of my own naivety. We parked across the street from the gym. It was a massive glass-fronted building, modern and imposing. We could see the rows of treadmills on the second floor, the people running like hamsters on wheels. We waited. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. Maybe the owner isn't there, I said, feeling a pang of disappointment. He is there, Sarah said. His car is the black Porsche out front. He is always there on Tuesdays. Suddenly, there was movement near the front entrance. The glass doors slid open. 2 security guards stepped out. Between them walked Greg. He wasn't wearing his usual confident swagger. He was wearing his gym uniform, but he was carrying a cardboard box. His face was a mask of shock. He was arguing with the guards, gesturing wildly, pointing back at the building. Sarah let out a breath she seemed to have been holding for years. "Look at him," she said softly. "He looks so small." He did. Without the context of his authority, without the expensive equipment and the admiring clients, he was just a man in a polyester shirt getting kicked out of a building in the rain. One of the guards said something to him and pointed toward the parking lot. Greg threw his hands up. He shouted something that we couldn't hear through the glass of my car, but the body language was unmistakable. It was the tantrum of a child who had finally been told no. He walked toward his car, a leased BMW that I knew he could no longer afford. He threw the box into the back seat so hard it bounced. He stood there for a moment, hands on his hips, looking up at the sky. He looked lost. I felt a vibration in my pocket. I pulled out my phone. It was a notification from the community group. Comments were pouring in on my post. Susan M., "Oh my God, David, I am so sorry. We had no idea." Mark T. "I saw them together at the coffee shop last week. I thought it was just training. Stay strong, man." Linda K., "Disgusting behavior. We support you, David." And then, a text message from Eve. "Eve, you bastard. You posted that for everyone to see? My mom just called me crying. How could you?" I didn't reply. I simply blocked the number. I looked over at Sarah. She was crying, but they were silent tears, streaming down her face as she watched her husband get into his car. "Are you okay?" I asked. "No," she said. "I am not okay. But I am free." Greg's car engine roared to life. He peeled out of the parking lot, cutting off a delivery truck, driving with the reckless aggression of a man who has lost control of his own narrative. "He is going to Eve," I said. "Let him," Sarah said. "They deserve each other. They can have their attention now. They have the attention of the whole town." I started the car. "Where to?" "Home," she said. "I have to feed Leo. And then, I think I am going to paint the nursery. A different color. Something bright." I drove her back to her car at the diner. We stood in the rain for a moment before parting ways. "Thank you, David," she said. "I couldn't have done this alone." "Neither could I." "We are not friends, are we?" she asked, a sad smile playing on her lips. "We are just war buddies." "Maybe," I said. "But wars end. And then you have to rebuild." She got into her car and drove away. I watched her go, a woman who had lost a husband but found her dignity. I drove back to my silent house. The notification light on my phone was blinking incessantly. The community was buzzing. The gym was likely in chaos. Greg was probably screaming at Eve right now, blaming her for his firing. Eve was probably screaming back, blaming him for her public humiliation. I walked into the kitchen. I made a cup of tea. I sat by the window and watched the rain fall on the garden. The anger was gone. The adrenaline was fading. What was left was a strange, clean emptiness. It was the feeling of a hard drive that has been wiped. All the data was gone. All the corrupted files were deleted. I was alone. But for the first time in years, I wasn't lonely. I was just solitary. I took a sip of tea. It was hot, simple, and honest. "Husband number 2, I whispered to the empty room. "Game over." I didn't know what Chapter 5 would bring. Maybe a legal battle. Maybe silence. But I knew one thing, I was the one holding the pen now. And I was done writing dramas. It was time to write a manual on survival. I walked to the hallway mirror. I looked at myself. I looked tired. I looked older. But the man staring back at me wasn't a wallet. He wasn't a placeholder. He was David. And he was awake. I picked up my phone one last time. I opened the contacts. I scrolled to Eve. I pressed delete. It vanished. I put the phone down and walked into the living room to watch the rain wash the world clean. The storm was over. Now, we just had to deal with the mud. But mud washes off. Betrayal stains, but even stains fade if you stop letting the people who caused them live in your house. I closed my eyes and listened to the quiet. It was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. The silence of a house after a war is different from the silence of an empty house. It has texture. It has weight. For the first 2 weeks after Eve left, the silence felt like a heavy woolen blanket, stifling and hot, trapping the echoes of our final arguments in the corners of every room. But by the 4th week, the silence had changed. It became crisp, cool, and spacious. It was the silence of a blank page waiting for ink. I spent those weeks engaging in a ritual of purification. It was not spiritual, it was purely logistical. I hired a team of cleaners to scour the house from top to bottom, instructing them to remove anything that smelled of vanilla and sandalwood. I donated her clothes, the ones she hadn't managed to shove into her duffel bag, to a charity shop 3 towns over. I didn't want the risk of seeing a stranger wearing her jacket in the grocery store. The most significant change, however, was the room she used to call her sanctuary. The yoga room. The place where she would stretch and pose and take selfies for an audience I now knew included her ex-husband. I stripped the paint. I tore up the bamboo flooring. I repainted the walls a deep, thoughtful navy blue. I moved in a heavy oak desk, a leather armchair, and my high-fidelity audio equipment. It was no longer a shrine to her vanity. It was my listening room. My office. My command center. The world outside my renovated fortress continued to turn, but the orbit of the people who had tried to destroy me was decaying rapidly. I didn't need to spy on them to know this. In a suburban ecosystem, bad news travels faster than light. I heard through the grapevine, a neighbor who ran into Eve's mother at the pharmacy, that the romance of the century was not going according to the script. Greg and Eve had moved into a short-term rental apartment near the highway, a place with thin walls and a view of a used car lot. It was a far cry from the Architectural Digest lifestyle Eve was accustomed to. Without my income to subsidize her organic lifestyle, and without Sarah's inheritance to fund Greg's gambling and business expenses, reality had hit them with the force of a freight train. They were 2 parasites who had killed their hosts and were now trying to feed off each other. The result, predictably, was starvation. The legal process was the final surgical procedure needed to sever the limb completely. We met for mediation 6 weeks after the incident. The venue was a sterile conference room in a high-rise downtown, a place of glass and polished mahogany where emotions were reduced to line items on a spreadsheet. I arrived early. I sat on one side of the long table, flanked by my lawyer, a woman named Rebecca who had eyes like flint and a smile that could freeze water. Sarah was not there, her battle was separate, though we coordinated our strikes behind the scenes. When Eve walked in, I almost didn't recognize her. The transformation was startling. The glow was gone. Her hair, usually a glossy curtain of perfection, looked dull and was pulled back in a haphazard knot. She was wearing a suit that I recognized. I had bought it for her for an interview 3 years ago, but it hung loosely on her frame. She looked tired. Not the pretty, delicate exhaustion she used to feign to get out of chores, but a deep, gray weariness that seeped from her bones. Greg was not with her. This was not a social visit. She sat down opposite me. She didn't look at Rebecca. She looked straight at me. Her eyes were wet, pleading. She was trying to establish a connection, trying to activate the muscle memory of our marriage. She wanted me to see Eve, the woman I had promised to love. But I didn't see Eve. I saw a defendant. Rebecca opened the file. We are here to finalize the separation of assets and agree on the terms of the divorce based on the infidelity clause within the prenuptial agreement, she stated, her voice devoid of inflection. Eve's lawyer, a young man who looked like he would rather be anywhere else, cleared his throat. My client contends that the infidelity clause is punitive and that she contributed significantly to the household during the marriage. We are asking for a settlement of... Rebecca cut him off by sliding a single piece of paper across the table. It was not a legal brief. It was a printout of a bank transfer log. This is a record of funds transferred from the joint account to a private account held by Mr. Gregory Miller, labeled as consulting fees, Rebecca said. And this, she slid a second photo, is a time-stamped image from a security camera at a hotel in Portland, dated the same weekend Mrs. Harper claimed to be visiting her sick aunt. Eve flinched as if she had been slapped. We are not negotiating, Rebecca continued. The prenuptial agreement is ironclad. Proven infidelity results in a forfeiture of spousal support and claim to the primary residence. We are offering Mrs. Harper her personal vehicle, once she refinances the loan into her own name, and her personal effects. That is all. Eve looked at her lawyer. He gave her a subtle shake of the head. He knew they had no ammunition. David, Eve whispered. It was the first time she had spoken. Her voice cracked. David, please. You can't leave me with nothing. I looked at her. I folded my hands on the table. I am not leaving you with nothing, Eve, I said calmly. I am leaving you with exactly what you invested in this relationship. That is not fair. She hissed, the tears spilling over. I gave you 5 years of my life. I made this house a home. Everyone makes mistakes. A mistake is forgetting to buy milk, I said. A mistake is leaving the lights on. Plotting with your ex-husband to sell my house and leave me bankrupt is not a mistake. It is a conspiracy. She recoiled. You listened to the audio? I listened to everything, I said. I heard you call me a wallet with legs. Well, the wallet is closed, Eve. She stared at me, her face crumbling. The mask of anger slipped, revealing raw panic. Greg, he doesn't have any money. He lost his job. We are drowning, David. He is angry all the time. He blames me. I felt a flicker of something, not pity, but a distant, clinical recognition of suffering. It was like watching a documentary about a disaster in a foreign country. I warned you, I said softly. I told you that attention is a currency. You spent yours on the wrong investment. She buried her face in her hands and began to sob. It was a messy, loud sound that filled the sterile room. Her lawyer put a hand on her shoulder, looking uncomfortable. Sign the papers, Eve, I said. Or we go to court, and I play the audio recordings for the judge. And the press. She stopped crying abruptly. She looked up, her eyes wide with fear. The threat of public humiliation was the only lever that still worked on her. She picked up the pen. Her hand shook so badly she could barely form the letters. She signed the decree. She signed the asset forfeiture. She signed away her life as Mrs. Harper. When it was done, she stood up. She looked at me one last time, waiting for me to say something to absolve her. To tell her that deep down, I still cared. Goodbye, Eve, I said. She turned and walked out. She didn't look back. As the door closed, I felt a physical sensation of lightness, as if gravity had released its hold on my chest. It is done, Rebecca said, closing her folder. Yes, I said. It is done. I walked out of the building and into the sunlight. The city looked sharper, the colors more vivid. I took a deep breath of the cold air. It tasted of exhaust and coffee and freedom. I didn't go straight home. I had one stop to make. I drove to the suburbs, to a neighborhood that mirrored my own. I pulled up to a house with a white picket fence and a silver sedan in the driveway. Sarah was sitting on the front porch steps. She was wearing paint-splattered overalls and holding a mug of tea. When she saw my car, she smiled. It was a genuine smile, one that reached her eyes. I walked up the path. The smell of wet grass was strong. Hey, she said. Hey, I replied. I just came from the mediation. She nodded, blowing on her tea. Me too. Yesterday. It is over. How did it go? I asked, sitting down on the step next to her, leaving a respectful distance. He cried, she said. He begged. Then he got angry and called me names. Then, when my lawyer showed him the embezzlement charges we were prepared to file, he signed everything. He gave up custody rights in exchange for us dropping the criminal case. You dropped the case? She shrugged. I don't want Leo to have a father in prison. I just want him to have a father who is gone. Greg is moving to another state. His brother lives in Ohio. He is running away. He is good at that, I said. We sat in silence for a moment, watching a squirrel navigate the power lines across the street. How is the nursery? I asked. It is yellow now, she said. Sunshine yellow. It looks happy. That is good, I said. Yellow is a good color. She turned to look at me. Her face was clean of makeup, and she looked younger, stronger than she had in the diner. "What about you, David? What are you going to do now? Are you going to sell the house?" I shook my head. "No. I took it back. It is mine now. I am making it my own. Maybe I will get a dog. A real dog, not a purse accessory." She laughed. "That sounds nice, David," she said, her voice turning serious. "Thank you. I know I said it before, but you saved my life. I was asleep at the wheel. I would have let him drain me dry and never noticed until it was too late." "We saved each other," I said. "I was asleep too. We just woke each other up. Do you think," she hesitated, tracing the rim of her mug, "do you think we will ever trust anyone again?" I looked at the sky. It was a vast, unending blue. "I don't know," I admitted. "Not for a long time. But at least we know what to look for now. We know the difference between someone who loves us and someone who loves the attention we give them." She nodded. "Yeah. We learned the hard way." I stood up. I didn't want to overstay my welcome. We were bonded by trauma, but we needed to heal separately. We couldn't be each other's crutches forever. "Take care of Leo," I said. "Take care of yourself, David." I walked back to my car. I didn't look back, but I knew she was watching me go. It wasn't a sad departure. It was a release. I drove home. The sun was setting, casting long, golden shadows across the highway. I turned on the radio. Jazz. Complex, chaotic, beautiful jazz. When I got home, the house was dark. I didn't turn on the lights immediately. I walked into the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. I stood by the window looking out at the backyard. The phone in my pocket buzzed. I pulled it out. It was a message from an unknown number. "I miss you. I am so lonely. Please, David. Just talk to me." I knew who it was. The desperation radiated through the screen. She was sitting in that cheap apartment, listening to Greg complain, realizing that she had traded a palace for a prison. She was reaching out to the only stable thing she had ever known. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel triumph. I felt nothing. It was the indifference of a mountain to a storm that has already passed. I didn't reply. I didn't block the number. I simply turned off the phone. I walked into my new listening room. I sat in the leather armchair. I pressed play on the sound system. The music swelled, filling the space, bouncing off the dark blue walls. I thought about the concept of attention. Eve was right about one thing. People crave attention. It validates them. It makes them feel real. She had sought it like a drug, needing higher and higher doses from strangers to feel alive. She had consumed me, and when I ran dry, she moved to Greg. But she misunderstood the nature of attention. It isn't just about being looked at. It is about being seen. I had looked at her for 5 years, but I had never really seen her. I saw the wife I wanted, not the woman she was. And she had looked at me and seen a function, not a person. Now, in the dark, I saw myself. I was David. I was a data analyst. I was a man who liked jazz and order and quiet mornings. I was a man who had been broken and had put himself back together using the very tools that had been used to dismantle him. I was alone. And it was enough. I closed my eyes and let the music wash over me. The trumpet solo rose, high and clear, a single note holding steady against the silence. The game was over. The players had left the field. I was the only one left standing. And for the first time in my life, I liked the company.